Okay, now, so we will be continuing our discussion with Chapter 5. At least, tapos na tayo dun sa friend mo na chismosa. No? So we're done with the Conceptual Framework's qualitative characteristics. So now we'll be proceeding with Chapter 5, 6, and 7. Now, this is for Lesson 3 of your Module 1. So after natin i-discuss ito, of course, you right away answer the exercises and the activities. Okay, so we'll be going with the Conceptual Framework, Elements of Financial Statements. Okay, so pag sinabi natin financial statements, of course, portray the financial effects of the transactions and other events by grouping them into these so-called economic characters. Or itong sinasabi natin itong classes na to, these are the elements of financial statements, which are basically, dati ng Spec 1, we describe this as yung building blocks ng financial statements natin. It means, if we prepare financial statements, or if you look into the financial statements, basically what you're seeing are these elements. Okay? Elements of financial statements. Gumagawa tayo ng FS using these elements. And basically, these elements are 5. No? At alam mo na dapat itong elements na to. So, sino-sino ba itong mga elements na to? Number 1 is the asset. Of course, kung may asset, may liability, meron ding equity, income, and of course, yung expense. Okay, so these 5 are the elements of financial statements. So basically, they are grouped into 2. No? Itong first 3 na to, assets, liability, and equity, these are what we call financial position elements. Okay, or they describe the financial position of a particular company or entity. Whereas this remaining 2, performance or financial performance elements. No? So we see yung performance ng company, yung kanyang level of income, based on these 2 elements, yung income and expenses. Okay? And so now let's discuss isa-isa itong mga elements na nabanggit natin. Okay? So first, let's talk about the assets. Okay? So under the revised conceptual framework, an asset is defined as present economic resource controlled by the entity as a result of past events. So, when we talk about asset, these are the things that we should take note of. Okay, number 1, ang sabi niya is resource, no? Or economic resource. Tapos, next thing, that is controlled. Controlled by the entity and as a result of past event. Okay, so yan yung kanyang essential characteristics, no? Present economic resource, tapos controlled. Yan yung sa letter B, economic resource is a right that has the potential to produce economic benefit and control siya. So pag sinabi kasi natin economic resource, it means, sabi nga natin before, di ba, sa the definition ng asset is everything that you have. No, resources yan. Na pwede mong gamitin to produce cash flows, no? Or to produce income. Basically, yan yung sinasabi natin dito na economic resource. Ngayon, in-emphasize niya guys, no, that an asset does not necessarily be owned. Rather, ang kailangan lang natin is control. Sa accounting or sa higher accounting, you will see that meron tayong mga assets which are not necessarily tayo yung may-ari, pero sa accounting, nire-recognize natin as asset. No? Just like yung example natin last time, sa chapter 4, substance over form. Diba? One example na nilagyan natin dito before is yung finance lease. O yung parang, yung rent to own thing na yun, kung ma-remember nyo dati. Kasi kung titingnan natin ito, nire-rentahan mo pa lang siya, yung asset, by the end of the contract, it will be yours. But for accounting, from the beginning pa lang ng contract, it is as if nabili mo na yung asset. Therefore, recognize mo na siya as an asset, even though hindi mo siya own. Okay? Kasi nga, ang importante, based on our definition, control. Yung ikaw yung nagmamanage kung paano ka mag-generate ng income. Okay? So, yan yung mga characteristics ng asset natin. So, nag-mention nyo dyan yung right. Pag sinabi natin right, rights that have the potential to produce economic benefits. So, yung benefit na to, no, yung right nga yung parang control part. So, paano tayo magkakaroon ng economic benefit on this part? No? So, number one, right that corresponds to an obligation of another entity. So, pwede right because another entity may obligation sa atin. Like, meron tayong right to receive cash. Example, yung receivable. Diba? So, pag meron kang receivable, you have the right to receive cash. Therefore, receivable is considered to be an asset. No? Right to receive goods or service. Ito naman yung sa mga prepayments natin or advance payments to suppliers. No? Let's say nag-advance ka, nag-bayad sa supplier, therefore you have the right to receive the goods. Or nag-advance ka ng payment for service, yung prepaid natin, diba? Prepaid insurance or prepaid rent or whatever prepaid expenses yan, you have the right to receive the service. Okay? Or to exchange economic resources with another party on favorable terms. Ito normally dun sa higher accounting pa to, no? Just like example is yung options. No? Yung options wherein you can acquire an asset in exchange for another asset later on favorable terms. Pero later pa natin yung may encounter talaga specifically. For example, yung options. No? Right to benefit from an obligation of another party if specified uncertain future events occur. Pero ito para sa mga ano pa to, sa mga derivatives. Pero hindi pa natin, sa mga advanced accounting pa natin ito may encounter. No? So that's number one. Now, another form of economic benefit here is the right that do not correspond to another party's obligation. Just like first, right over physical objects such as property, plant, and equipment or inventories. Ibig sabihin, meron kang right over a particular asset. No? For example, you have a property, plant, and equipment. Meron kang equipment, pwede mong gamitin yun, no? To generate income. Meron kang lupa, pwede mong ibenta siya. No? O meron kang inventory, pwede mong ibenta. Or another one is right to intellectual property. No? Or yung, let's say, yung mga copyright. No? Kunyari, gumawa ka ng libro, gumawa ka ng kanta, or gumawa ka ng movie, copyrighted yan. That's considered to be intellectual property. If that's yours, then you have the right over that, no? Para mag-generate ka ng income coming from such property. Okay, another one is yung rights established by contract or by legislation, okay, such as owning a debt instrument or an equity instrument or owning a registered patent. For example, ito na nga, no, bumili ka ng share, ikaw yung investor. Bumili ka ng shares ng isang company. Okay? Let's say ng San Miguel. You are considered to be a stockholder or investor ka. In this case, that is established by contract. Therefore, you have the right to. And later, pag nag-aral kayo ng law on corporations, partnership and corporations, you will see na may mga rights yung stockholder. Just like, for example, rights to dividend, no? Rights to vote. So, mga ganyan. Based on contract siya or legislation. Okay, when we talk about economic benefit, potential to produce economic benefit, an economic resource is a right. Sabi natin kanina, that has a potential to produce economic benefit. No? For the potential to exist, it does not need to be certain or even likely that the right will produce economic benefits. Hindi naman kailangan sigurado na talaga tayo na makaproduce siya ng economic benefit. Okay? It's only necessary that the right already exists. Now, ang importante kasi doon that you know that the right is there. Now, it does not necessarily need to be certain when it comes to the economic benefit na sinasabi natin. Kasi let's say for example, ganito, meron kang equipment. Sabi natin, di ba? Meron kang equipment. Yung equipment na yan, you have the right over that equipment. So, pwede mong gamitin sa pag-produce ng goods na pwede mong mabenta. No? Hindi naman kailangan talagang certain, hindi naman natin nakikita ang future eh. So, hindi naman natin nakikita talaga kung magpo-produce ka ng goods o what, kung paano mo gagamitin yung equipment na yan. Pero, at least you know that you have the right. No? Kasi pag right naman yan, syempre, depende na sa yan kung i-exercise mo. No? At least, importante, you are certain that you have that particular right. Okay, an economic resource to produce economic benefits in an entity is entitled to. No? So, paano natin masasabi na makaproduce ng economic goods to receive contractual cash flows? Ito, in terms of mga ano naman ito, let's say, kunyari, may pautang ka, no? Loan, bangko, may pautang. So, yung bangko, meron siyang contractual right to receive cash, no? So that is example. Yung receivables nga natin. Yung receivables natin is considered to be contractual right to receive cash. No? Another one, to exchange economic resources with another party on favorable terms. So na example nito yung options. Pero hindi na muna natin i-discuss dito yun. No? Later pa yan sa higher accounting. Options na yun. Ano pa? To produce cash inflows or avoid cash outflows. Okay? So, pwede natin gamitin siya to produce cash inflows or pwede kung hindi siya makaproduce ng cash inflows, at least ma-minimize natin yung cash outflows. Or, let's say, kunyari, mas maging efficient. Now, later, kasi pag nag-accounting tayo, you will see na yung benefit, hindi naman ibig sabihin ng benefit is dagdag cash flow. No? Pwede savings in the operations, let's say, magiging mas efficient tayo, makakasave tayo ng pera. For accounting, that's already considered as benefit. Okay? To receive cash by selling the economic resource. Siyempre, yung mayroon kang asset nga, inventory, typically, siyempre, nabenta mo yan. Or even yung property, plant, and equipment, if you wish so, pwede mo siyang ibenta. No? Or to extinguish a liability by transferring an economic resource. Or pwede mo siyang gamitin na pambayad ng utang. Pwede cash, ito pambayad siya, no? Or pwede rin naman na other assets. No? Sa oblique formulator, pag-uusapan yan, that's yun yung pago. No? Payment in kind. So, pag may asset ka, pwede mong gamitin yan yung payment of a liability. Okay, so that is for economic benefits. Now, na-mention natin dito yung control. Kanina na-mention natin yung control. No? An entity controls the asset if it has the present ability to direct the use of the asset and to obtain the economic benefits that flow from it. Ibig sabihin, the company has the power to decide kung paano niya gagamitin yung asset. Again, no, sabi natin sa accounting, not necessarily own. Okay? Ang kailangan lang para maging asset siya is control. It means the management has the right to decide on how we are going to generate the benefit out of that asset. Okay, so control includes the ability to prevent others from using such asset. Siyempre, pag-asset mo nga, ibig sabihin, ikaw yung magmamanage, ikaw yung pwede mong pagbawalan ng ibang tao, no? Nagamitin siya. Therefore, preventing others from obtaining the economic benefits. Control may arise if the entity enforces legal rights. No? So, pag may legal right ka, then pwede mong i-enforce siya. Kung walang legal rights, control can still exist if the entity has other means of ensuring that no other party can benefit. Yung example na nga natin dito is yung sa finance list na nga dito, di ba? In reality, nirerentahan mo siya, yung asset. No? But because you're renting the asset substantially solo, kasi may mga rules tayo dito sa accounting later. No? That it could be considered a finance list. So, ikaw na yung parang nag-control ng asset for the entirety of its life. No? So, syempre, pag nirentahan mo, let's say, nirentahan mo yung particular asset na yan for substantially very long period of time, you are controlling the asset. Therefore, you can prevent other people or other parties in using the particular asset na yan. No? Or another example dito is, An entity has access to technical know-how and has the ability to keep this know-how secret. Just like yung may mga tinatawag kasi tayong intangible assets, no? O yung mga assets na walang physical existence, no? Or something like it's in our mind. For example, you're very familiar with Jollibee, no? And of course, Jollibee is sikat when it comes to its recipe. At tinatawag nila, that's a top secret. So for them, sa company nila, they consider it as an asset. Okay? Yung mga ganyan bagay na yan. So that is also considered to be as control. Okay? So that is asset. Again, yung asset, tatlo naman yung kailangan. May benefit, it's a resource na, yung benefit pala dapat dito, no? Very important na element ng asset is yung benefit. Dapat may benefit ka makukuha. Okay? Next, it is control. Okay? Ibig sabihin, not necessarily or as long as you can decide on how to use the asset. Control yan. And, as a result of passing that, ibig sabihin lang naman may transaction that transpired before. May transaction na nangyari para masabi natin talaga that asset is your asset. So next, we will go with the liability. Okay? At page 102, under the revised conceptual framework, the liability is defined as a present obligation of an entity to transfer an economic resource as a result of past event. Okay. When we say liability, the first term that comes into our mind is obligation. Okay? Dati kasi yung definition nito, yung outflow of economic resources. So sa kanya, medyo iba niya na dito sa revised conceptual framework, transfer of economic resource. Doon sa dati, outflow. Mas madali pa intindihin natin ang outflow. Ibig sabihin, may lalabas na economic resources in our part. So dito sa kanya, sabi niya, transfer of economic resource. So meron pa rin, may mawawala sa atin. And ganun din, syempre may past event. So essential characteristic of liability, yun na nga, may obligation tayo. Obligasyon, we have to comply of something. No, meron tayong kailangan gawin sa liability. No? The entity liable must be identified. It is not necessary that the payee or entity to whom the obligation owed is identified. Now, paano yun, sir? Pwede ba yun? Meron akong utang pero hindi ko alam kung kanino ako may utang. Sa accounting, yes, it's possible. No? Importante, alam mo na ikaw may utang. The entity liable is identified. Kung tayo, alam natin may liability tayo, okay yun. It's not necessarily that alam natin kung kanino. Ano yung mga example nito? Sa accounting, later, pag-uusapan natin ito. No? Typical example nito is for accounting of warranty liability. Normally sana dun sa higher, intermediate accounting ko, accounting for liabilities ito eh. No? Pero typical example niya, warranty. Ganito kasi yan, di ba? Alam niyo naman siguro, pag bumili ka ng gamit, electronic, gadgets, or mga sasakyan, it is accompanied by tinatawag natin warranty. Ibig sabihin, pag may defect yung gamit, pwede mong ibalik dun sa company para pwede nilang ayusin for free. No? Or pwedeng i-replace, depende doon sa extent ng damage. Ngayon, syempre, kung let's say tayo yung nagbenta ng goods, no? Pag mayroong bumalik sa atin na customer na may ganun palang siya at kailangan natin panagutan yung warranty na nangyari, na mayroon palang defect yung goods natin, therefore, we have a liability on the part. Okay? Yun nga na, sa dinami-dami ng ating naibenta, sa dinami-dami ng napagbentahan natin, hindi natin ma-identify talaga kung sino yung babalik. No? Kaya nga, this is also a case, just like na-mention natin before, this is used, ginagamitan siya ng estimates. Okay? Isa ito doon sa example na ginagamitan natin ng estimates. Now, meron tayong liability. For sure. No? Hindi natin alam kung may babalik. Pero sa accounting, we already consider that. Now, ang tanong, kilala mo ba kung sino yung babalik? Hindi. No? Pero so yung sabi natin dito, importante, the company, we know we are liable. Hindi importante that we know kung kanino. Okay, so that's one of the characteristics. Number two, obligations to transfer an economic resource. Dati nga outflow. Mas madaling intindi, di ba? Outflow, may lumalabas na economic resource. Ano yung economic resource na yan? Asset. Ibig sabihin, mayroong lalabas na asset sa atin to transfer. Just like for example, di ba? You have an accounts payable. Payable is a liability. Ano yung obligation mo doon? To pay cash. So may lalabas na cash, magta-transfer ka ng cash. Or let's say, kunyari, unearned service revenue. No? Unearned service revenue is a liability. Unearned nga kasi yung ating client nagbayad siya in advance. So what's the obligation there? The obligation is to provide for the service. Paano siya mag-provide naman ng service? So pag-provide ng service, hindi mawawala na meron tayong mga gagasasin. So meron pa rin tayong outflow. No? Or meron pa rin tayong ibibigay kung sa another party. May transfer pa rin. So yan yung ating second characteristic, may transfer of asset or economic resource. And next one is the obligation is a present obligation that exists as a result of past event. Ibig sabihin, yun na nga, may transaction that transpired, may nangyari na. Hindi natin pwedeng i-consider ang liability as a liability if future pa yung transaction. Kasi sasabihin mo, ay bukas bibili ako ng ganito. Bukas ka pa bibili. So ngayon, hindi ka pa bumili, wala ka pang liability ngayon. Kasi wala pa nga yung transaction, past event, kasi sabi. Pero bukas, pag bumili ka na, inutang mo, meron ka ng utang. No? Kasi nga, nangyari na yung transaction. So past. Okay? So na-mention natin dyan yung obligation. So due to responsibility that an entity has no practical ability to avoid. Kung mga parang malamang at sa malamang no choice ka. Pero, gagawin mo talaga. Because, obligasyon mo yan. Pwedeng legal or pwedeng constructive. Okay? Pag sinabi natin legal, legally enforceable siya by law. No? By contract, no? Or by statutory requirements. Siya pa typical example, kunyari, accounts payable. No? Bumili ka. Yun yung contract. No? Kontrata yun, yung bumili ka or nagbenta sa'yo, yung supplier. Therefore, you are legally obliged to pay. No, kailangan mo siyang bayaran talaga. Or by statutory requirement or based on laws or rules. No? Let's say for example, yung liability mo to pay taxes. Because may income ka, you have to pay your income tax. Not because of the contract with the government, but because it is provided for by law, no? So, pwedeng gano'n, magkaroon ka ng obligation because of statutory requirement. Or pwedeng constructive. Ito, hindi naman siya legally enforceable by law, but it's just that normal business practice mo and it creates expectation dun sa ibang parties, no? For example, dito yung kanya, for example, yung warranty period extended out. Kasi ang typical na warranty natin, kung familiar ka, is 1 year. But typical warranty period is 1 year. Ngayon, let's say, sabi mo, ay sige, hindi naman, ito yung 1 year, nga pala, this is statutory, required to by law. No? So, statutory yan. Pero sabi mo, okay, sige, I will be providing warranty for 2 years. So, yung additional na gagagastos mo for that additional year, hindi na siya contractual, hindi siya statutory. Na-constructive because that is your practice. No? Sa'yo na yan, parang ginusto mo yan. Na-transfer, page 103, para natin masasabi yung transfer na to ng economic resource. Number 1, obligation to pay cash. Na-mention na natin kanina, di ba? Yung accounts payable, mabayad ka, cash. Ano pa? Obligation to deliver goods or non-cash resource. Yan ko na advance payment ng customer. Yung customer nagbayad sa atin ng advance. Therefore, ano yung obligation natin? To deliver the goods. Ilalabas pa rin. Ano yung goods? Hindi nga lang pera, goods siya. Ano pa? Letter C. Obligation to provide service at some future time. Yung unearned nga natin, sabi natin dito, unearned revenues. Diba? Provide ng service. Letter D. Obligation to exchange economic resource with another party on an unfavorable terms. Doon pa ito sa options. Doon sa asset kasi kanina, favorable term. Dito, unfavorable term. So, nandun pa rin siya sa options natin, mga ganun. Pero letter na yun. And the obligation to transfer economic is specified uncertain future event first. Unspecified uncertain future event. So, this is on the case of contingent liability. Contingent siya kasi nga depende. Yung sinasabi natin, depende pag may nangyari something. So ito yun, no? If specified uncertain future event occur. Pag nag-occur yung future event na yan na hindi pa natin sure kung mangyayari, then magkakaroon tayo na liability. Pero later na yan, yung mga contingent liabilities niya. And past event, sabi natin dito, kailan ba tayo masasabi namin past event na first, an entity has already obtained the economic benefits. So, meron ka ng, excuse me, the transaction, meron ka ng transaction. So, meron ng parang transfer of the benefit, no? Or flow of asset. And the other one is an entity must transfer an economic resource. Kasi initially, maka-obtain ka ng economic resource or benefit, later, syempre, meron ka na namang transfer. So, may lalabas kayo. So, that's past event. Okay? Ngayon, yung equity, hindi niya na binigyan ng definition niya. Kasi makikita natin yung definition ng equity dito sa page 99. Doon sa pinakababa, page 99. Yung definition kasi ng equity, equity is just what? Residual interest. Ibig sabihin, kung magkano yung matitira. Matitira sa ano? Assets after deducting all its liabilities. So, equity para sa accounting equation is equals to assets minus liabilities. So, actually, yung equity na yan is more like the balancing figure between the assets and the liabilities. No? So, yun lang yung definition niya. Actually, wala siyang recognition principle either, makikita niyo. Kasi hindi naman natin nire-recognize ang equity. No? Yung equity, it's just happen that may recognition ka ng assets, may recognition ka ng liability. Pag may matitira, ang tawag doon, equity. Okay? So, after ng assets and liabilities, now we will proceed with income. Okay, pag sinabi natin income, increases or income. Increase in asset. So, dalawa lang naman yun. Decrease in liability. That results in increases in equity. Diba, diniscuss natin before dun sa accounting. How does income affect equity? Siyempre, dagdag. Kasi mas gusto mo yan. So, pag may income ka, dagdag din sa equity. Ano yung effect sa asset? Possibly increase the asset na, and then sa liabilities, decrease in the liability. No? Other than those relating to contributions from equity holders. Okay? Tara naman yung dalawa eh. No? Pwede dagdag asset. For example, nag-provide ka ng service for cash. Debit cash, asset. Or kung ang credit man, debit accounts receivable. Tama? Well, nag-decrease na liability, for example, yung unearned. Diba? Pag may unearned ka, tapos nag-provide ka ng service, so ano yung magiging entry mo? I-debit mo na yung unearned, i-credit mo na yung income. Hindi nabawasan yung liability, debit, unearned. Okay, so that's income. Okay, ngayon, yung income na to, meron siyang dalawang classification actually. Meron tayong tinatawag na revenues at meron tayong tinatawag na gains. Now, ano yung difference nitong revenues and gains? Pag sinabi ng revenues, arises in the course of the ordinary regular activities and is referred to a variety of names, including sales, fees, interest, dividends, royalties, and rent. While gains, yan na lang natin yung gains muna para mas madali siyang ilong. Gains represent other items that meet the definition of income and do not arise from the ordinary course of the business. Ibig sabihin, ito lang siya. If yung income na yan arise from your typical operations, that is considered to be a revenue. Let's say, for example, meron kang business ng grocery. Ano ba yung business ng grocery store? Nagbebenta ng groceries. Pag nakabenta ka ng grocery items, ang tawag doon ay sales. Sales revenue. Okay? Pero kung let's say, kunyari doon sa grocery store mo, meron kang delivery truck na luma na, kapalitan mo na, ibebenta mo. Binenta mo yung delivery truck at medyo nakaginansya ka ng konti, gain na siya. Gain ang tawag doon. Bakit? Because that's not part of your business eh. Hindi mo naman business yung pagbebenta ng truck. Kasi ang business mo pagbebenta ng grocery items. Okay? Or let's say, for example, real property developer. Let's say, Camellia. Si Camellia, ang business niya ay nagde-develop, di ba? Bibili ng lupa, de-develop niya, lagyan niya ng bahay, bibenta niya. Pag nakabenta siya ng lupa na yun, or house and lot, that is sales na yun. Revenue. Okay? Pero kung nakabenta siya ng iba, other than those na mga lupa niya, let's say kunyari, meron siyang construction vehicle, truck, no? So pag nagbenta siya ng truck na yun, hindi niya naman business yung pagbebenta ng truck eh. Pero nakaginansya siya. Ang tawag yung IT. Okay? Now, statement of financial performance. Inuna nito before yung expenses. So, the revised Conceptual Framework introduces the term statement of financial performance. The statement refers to the statement of profits and loss or loss ends presenting the comprehensive income. Or in short, parang yung typical na alam natin na income statement. No? Yung statement of profit or loss, ang typical na alam natin dyan, natin before is yung income statement. Parang lang naman yun. Okay? However, in developing accounting standards, there are some items of income and expenses that are included in the OCI. Yung nga lang kasi guys, no? Later, i-discuss ko to dun sa chapter 9. No? Dun sa annex. Yun na, yung sa income natin, meron kasi may classification yan eh. May mapupunta sa tinatawag natin profit or loss, and then meron tayong pinaklasify as other comprehensive income. Doon i-discuss ko kung paano tayo mag-present. Yung sinasabi na lang dito, doon i-discuss natin these are income. No? Pero yung mga income na yan, there are income, most of it will go to the profit or loss or income statement, and some limited items will go to OCI or other comprehensive income. Pero doon ko na i-discuss, sino-sino ba ito? Bakit may ganyan? Okay? Dagdag na lang. Next, expense naman. Okay, pag sinabi natin expense, syempre kabaliktaran lang ng income. Kung increase ka ng asset, syempre decrease. Very typical. Or an increase in liability. Diba? Typical yan pag may expense, bayaran mo ng cash. Bawas cash. No? Kung hindi, example natin doon sa adjusting entries na topic yung accrual. Diba? May expense ka na pero hindi mo pa nabayaran. So ano mangyayari? Makakaroon ka ng liability. For example, diba yung sahod, hindi mo pa nabayaran yung sahod. So meron pa accrual doon, adjusting entry. Debit, salaries expense, credit, salaries payable. Pwede dumagdag siya sa liability. Okay? So, ganun dito, kung yung income ay dalawa, ganun dito. Ito, meron siyang expenses proper, yung talagang expenses din siya, and the other one is losses. medyo the nature or the definition is almost the same. Na? Pag sinabi natin expenses, ito kasi yung talagang ginagastos natin in our operations. Part talaga siya ng operations. Just like nagpasweldo ka ng tao, expense. Nagbayad ka ng kuryente, tubig, depreciation is an expense. No? The other things, renta, insurance, supplies. So those are expenses. Kasi natural din sa business. That's part of your operations. Pero yung mga losses are yung kabaligtaran ng gains. No? These are not really part of the operations, pero nagkaroon ka ng loss. For example, yung truck. Kabaligtaran yung truck. Grocery ka, di ba? Grocery store yung kanina, nagbenta tayo ng delivery truck, medyo palagi yung presyo. Loss na yung tawag doon. Kasi hindi mo nga business na magbenta ng truck. Kita dyan? Pati ito pa yung mga casualty losses na tinatawag. Sunugan, hindi mo naman business na magsunog. Hindi mo naman business na magsunog. Dahil kasi nasunugan ka, syempre that's a loss. Diba? Nasiraan ka ng asset, it's a loss. Yan, binaha, yung storm surge. Wala pa yung nilabay, binauso ko. Storm surge, tsunami, hurricanes. Diba? Ina-mention kanina, disposal of non-current assets. Yeah, so expense and losses. Okay, so that's it for our chapter 5. Now we will proceed with chapter 6. Okay, recognition and measurement. Okay, yung sa conceptual framework pa rin tayo, you will see this as part of the conceptual framework. So meron siya mga binibigay nga doon, concept principles kasama ito. Recognition principle. The revised conceptual framework defines recognition as the process of capturing or inclusion, okay, in the financial statement an item that meets the definition of an asset, liability, equity, income, expense. So in short, if an item is to be included in the financial statement, then that is recognized, no? Kaya baka may mga kayong mga term na recognize. Recognize meaning it undergone process of recognition and then it met the definition of a particular element. Let's say for example, nakita mo meron kang bahay. And then, sa business tayo. Kaya meron kang delivery truck. Tapos question mo, itong delivery truck na to, ito ba ay may benefit ba akong makukuha? Yes, pwede mong gamitin. Control ko ba to? Yes, kasi ako yung nagmamanage, ako nag-design. May past event? Yes, kasi binili ko to before. Therefore, na-meet niya yung definition ng ng asset. Therefore, pwede natin siyang i-recognize as an asset. Therefore, dapat kasama siya dun sa ating financial statements. So, paano siya papasok sa financial statements? Kailangan may journal entry. No? So, sa accounting, to simplify, pag may journal entry, pag ginawa mo ng journal entry, it means it was recognized. No? Okay? The amount of which the asset or liability recognized in the financial statement is reported at carrying amount. Now, kung magkano yung nilagay mo doon, yung tawag doon ay carrying amount. And we'll be discussing more about that later. Okay. Recognition criteria, page 112. Only items that meet the definition of an asset, liability, equity are recognized in the statement of financial position. Remember, minimum ko pala kanina dito. Although may specific pa siya dyan later, no? Pero yung definition kasi, di ba kanina, sabi natin that asset is economic resource, may benefit, controlled by the entity, is a result of past event. That's the definition. If na-meet niya yung definition na yon, therefore, it is considered to be an asset. Ganun din yung liability. So sabi niya, if the entity has an obligation, no, to transfer economic resource as a result of past event, therefore, recognize natin siya as a liability. Okay? So similarly, all the items that meet the definition of income and expense, kanina yung increase in asset, decrease in liability, other than the, and ultimately increase in the equity other than those transactions with the owner. That is income. Pag na-meet niya yung definition na yun, therefore, isama natin siya. Recognize. Okay? Dati meron tong specific eh. Dati meron tayong mga sa recognition principle before, yung dating conceptual framework, na may dalawa kaming rules kasi ginagamit. No? Probable, measurable. Ito yung dating rule. Pero sa accounting standards later, makikita nyo, when you go with the PFRS, makikita pa rin natin siya to. Okay, pero dito sa bagong conceptual framework, medyo iba niya. Ang sabi niya, definition na lang daw. Wala na yung sinasabi ng recognition principle. Dati kasi, no, an asset liability income and expense is recognized if it is probable na, ganyan, may economic benefit na, may decrease in decrease or outflow economic resources. And the cost can be measured reliably. That's before. Later, pag nagpasok tayo din sa standards, siguro sa chapter 8 and 9, nandun pa rin yung mga ganyan items. Okay, basta yun na lang ha. Kaya sabi niya dyan, recognition does not focus anymore on how probable. So wala na yung mga ganyan. But this, again, this is based on the conceptual framework. Iba yung standard sa conceptual framework. Okay? Now, sa income recognition, ano lang, income recognition muna tayo. Basta kasi sa assets, liabilities, equity, definition naman siya. Income recognition. Paano natin masasabi na may income tayo? O kailan natin masasabi na may income tayo? Kailan tayo magre-recognize ng income? The basic principle of income recognition is that income shall be recognized when earned. Diba? Sabi natin before, income recognition principle, income is recognized when earned, not kung kailan collected. No? So, kailan ba yung earned? With respect to sale of goods in the ordinary course of the business or sale of inventory, merchandising, or sa manufacturing. The point of sale is unquestionably, the point of income of recognition. Kung kailan siya naibenta. No? Just like, meron tayong mga terms before, FOB, destination, FOB, shipping point. Doon natin makikita yung point of sale. Kasi pag wala ng delivery na matagalan, or malapit lang, let's say, kunyari, over the counter, bumili ka. Kinuha mo yung goods, nagbayad siya, at kinuha niya yung goods, nagbayad siya, that is point of sale. Income na yun. No? Pag may mga terms tayo, let's say transportation, delivery, FOB shipping point, FOB destination, you have to consider that. Para kung kailan mo masabi na meron ng transfer, no? Or point of sale. Say that differently, the legal title to the goods passes to the buyer, the point of sale. However, under certain conditions, income may be recognized at the point of production, during production, and at the point of collection. Hindi niya na ilano dito, no? Kasi before, diniscuss niya pa yun sa dating conceptual framework. Kasi other than the point of sale, there are other income recognition tayo ginagawa. Just like, mention niya dyan, point of production. Ginagamit natin yan normally sa agriculture. Kunyari, meron kang baboy, yung baboy mo nanganak. Nanganak pa lang, hindi mo pa nabenta, pero income na yun for accounting. No? So may mga ganun ba? Pero, baka later pa natin i-discuss. Baka doon sa chapter 8 or chapter 9, ganyan tayo. Now next, expense recognition. Kasi income recognition yung kanina. Expense recognition. The basic expense recognition says that expenses are recognized when incurred. The term is incurred. Na-incurred na. Okay? So, kailan ba natin siya na-incurred? Okay? So, ito, no? So, sa ating expense recognition, paano ba natin nire-recognize yung expense? In-apply natin ang tinatawag na matching principle. Oh, very interesting. I think, ewan ko na-discuss ko sa inyo ito sa cost of sales part. Okay? Pero ito, no? Ang sinasabi nitong matching principle is that, or the principle in expense recognition is, expense is recognized on the period it contributed to income. Kasi the principle here in accounting is that walang income without expense. Kung gusto mo magka-income, you have to incur some amount. No? For example, sa services, you have to have some people to work for you. No? You have to use supplies. Or let's say, kunyari, sa sale of goods, meron kang bibili ng goods mo na. Pag binenta mo, magiging cost of sales. So, may income ka, it's because meron kang ginastos na expense. So, the principle here is that kung kailan mo na-recognize yung income, the same time mo i-recognize yung sales. Ano yung cost o yung expense niya. Kung kailan yung income, the same period mo i-recognize yung expense para ma-compute natin kung magkano talaga yung income o net income para mas ma-compute natin magiging. Kasi let's say for example, ito yung typical example ko. Kunyari nagbenta ka, may binenta ka. Maraming show pa phone na lang, cellphone. Nagbenta ka ng iPhone 12. Yung iPhone 12, ang presyo is 200,000. Kunyari, iPhone 12. Ngayon, binili mo yan dun sa supplier, dun sa international, sa California, Apple. Ang cost of sales mo ay 150,000. So, meron kang gross profit or tumubo ka ng 50,000. Okay? Nalagyan natin ng year. For example, 2020, ngayong year, na-recognize mo yung sales. Diba? Nandito yung sales. 200. Tapos, let's say 2021, kung paano na-recognize, let's say, yung cost of sales. May mga ganyan cases kasi kunyari yung sale na to happened on sometime by the end of the year. Malapit siya dun sa December 31. Kaya nangyari, ay yung sales na dun sa 2020. Pero yung cost of sales, dun mo pala na-recognize sa yung 150 sa 2021. So ano yung effect niyan? Noong 2020 may sales ka, wala kang cost of sales. Lahat ng punta sa profit, 200. 2021, wala kang sales, may cost of sales ka, lugi ka na 150. So, hindi mo practically ma-measure kung magkano yung income talaga. Kaya dapat ang sinasabi, kung 2020 ka nag-recognize ng sale, dapat yung cost of sales, i-recognize mo rin on this same year or this same period. Para sa ano? Ma-compute mo na mabuti yung net income or yung financial performance. Okay? So, yan lang naman yung gusto sabihin itong matching principle ito. Ngayon, itong matching principle, meron siyang tatlong application. Okay, kung paano tayo nag-recognize ng expense, meron tatlo yan. Okay? First one is cause and effect. Cause and effect association. The next is systematic and rational. Systematic and rational allocation. And the last one is immediate recognition. Okay, so discuss natin kung paano natin ina-apply ito sa pag-recognize ng income. Okay? Cause and effect, page 114. Under this principle, expenses recognized when revenue is already recognized. The reason is that directly makita mo, ma-associate mo yung income na to or itong expense na to is directly associated or makita mo talaga siya with the income. Just like for example, itong cost of sales. Itong cost of sales na 150, bakit meron kang ganito? It's because you have the sales. Kung wala kang sales, wala kang cost of sales. So directly mamamatch mo siya. Okay? So, simple lang naman. Kung kailan mo na-recognize yung income, if it is directly associated sa income, i-recognize mo na rin yung expense. Okay? Typical example yan yung cost of sales. Ano pa? For example, sales commission. Yeah. This is an expense. No? Yung empleyado natin nakabayad pa, tapos bibigyan natin ng commission. Sales commission. Siyempre kung kailan yung sales, din na i-recognize yung expense nito. Kasi kitang-kita mo naman eh. Kung walang sales, walang sales commission. Nakuha? So, ganun siya, no? So, cause and effect association yan. Okay? Whereas, pag sinabi natin systematic and rational, some costs are expensed by simply allocating them over the previous benefit. Because you cannot associate directly yung benefit na nakuha natin or yung income from the expense. So, what we're doing is that, ina-allocate na lang natin siya over a certain period of time. Typical example ito yung depreciation natin ng property, plant, and equipment. Except for, ito cost accounting kasi ito, no? Except sa manufacturing kasi, there are depreciation that will go part of the cost of sales. No? Pero wala muna tayo doon. Cost accounting yan eh. Sa merchandising muna tayo. Let's say yung building natin, syempre yung building natin, let's say its useful life is good for 30 years. So magbe-benefit tayo doon for the next 30 years. And yung benefit na nakukuha natin from the building, hindi natin directly ma-associate with the income. No? Hindi direct yung association nila. Therefore, ano lang yung gagawin natin? I-spread na lang natin yung kanya cost at i-depreciate natin, allocate natin siya over 30 years kung kailan tayo mag-benefit. Okay? So, ganyan, typical example ng depreciation o yung mga prepaid natin. For example, yung prepaid insurance. No? Prepaid insurance natin. Kasi magbe-benefit pa yan for how many years pa in the future eh. So, ano gagawin na lang natin? Unti-unti natin siya kung kailan natin na-consume or na-expire. So, that is an application of systematic and rational allocation. Okay? Whereas immediate recognition under this principle, the cost incurred is expensed outright because of uncertainty of future economic benefits or difficulty of reliably associating certain costs with future revenues. Or, if yung isang item hindi na siya makapag-provide ng benefit, therefore, hindi siya asset. And since ginastosan na natin yan at wala na tayong makukuhang benefit dyan, i-expense na lang natin siya immediately. Okay? Just like for example, yung mga typical example na dito is salaries. Kasi kung yan ganito, no? Yan, office salaries, ganyan, most administrative expenses. Kasi, nagtrabaho lang yung tao. Salaries, diba? Yung tao nagtrabaho. Pag nagtrabaho na yung tao at tapos na yung trabaho niya for the particular month, sa sweldo mo na siya, wala na, tapos na yun. No? Nagawa niya na dapat ang gawin. At wala na tayo makukuha ang benefit. Kasi nag-benefit na tayo during the time na tinatrabaho niya. Wala na tayo makukuha ang benefit in the future. Expect na natin yung salary niya. Okay? Or, ano pa yung example na dyan? Advertising, kunyari, most advertising selling. Let's say nag-advertise na tayo ngayon for this month. Nag-advertise na tayo for this month. Although hindi natin kasi ma-associate nga, sabi natin kanina, diba, difficult to associate future. Hindi na natin masasabi it's because ba nag-advertise tayo, dadami yung sales sa future. Hindi natin alam. Kung dumami lang yung sales natin ngayon, okay na yun. No? Pero hindi na natin mag-expect na baka magkaroon pa tayo ng benefit in the future. So, expect na natin siya. Okay, immediate recognition. Ayan, pag wala na siyang future economic benefit, pag ginastos mo na at wala ka ng future benefit dyan, expense mo na yan. Parang sa ligawan. Para ko na, naliligaw ka sa babae. Niligawan mo yung babae, binigyan mo ng flower, binigyan mo ng chocolate, kinain niya yung chocolate, tapos sinabi siya, ayaw ko sa'yo, huwag mo kuligawan. Ginasusan mo na eh. Wala nang future benefit. Expense na. Okay. So yun na, matching principle, no? It's about kung kailan ka mag-recognize ng expense. Sabi ng matching principle, kung kailan ka nag-recognize ng revenue, dapat ganun din mag-recognize expense on the same period. That is mostly applicable for this. Pero kung hindi mo siya directly ma-associate, hindi na nga. Pwede i-allocate mo na lang siya over the periods benefited or if wala na tayo future benefit, expense mo na. Okay, next. Then recognition. Kabalik ka ng recognition. Siyempre, pag recognize, pinasok mo sa libro. Inentrihan mo, nilagay mo sa FS. Pag recognition, kabalik ka rin. Tatanggalin mo na siya sa financial statements. Okay? The recognition is defined as the removal of all or part of a recognized asset or liability from the statement of financial position. So, kailan nangyayari yan? Sabi natin kanina, kailan ba tayo nagre-recognize? If it met the definition, tama? Pag na-meet niya yung definition, recognize. Pag hindi niya na na-meet yung definition, de-recognize na. Now, ang sa pag-ibig. Dati, mahal na mahal ka niya. Recognize. Pero ngayon, di ka na na mahal. De-recognize mo niya. Okay, so yan So that's on the first part, recognition. Now, paano natin nagre-recognize? Asset, liability, and equity, nare-recognize natin. Even income and expense, are recognized when they meet the definition. Madali yung assets, liabilities, and equity. Again, assets and liability na talaga nare-recognize natin. Pag na-meet niya yung definition, may tatlong sinulat natin kanina. Income, nare-recognize natin siya when earned. Point of sale or may iba tayong rules na ginagamit. Doon sa standard na pag-uusapan natin. Expense, nare-recognize natin when incurred. So, ginagamitan natin siya ng matching principle. Again, na-associate natin yung income sa expense. Kung kailan yung income, dapat doon mo rin na-recognize yung expense. Not unless, kung hindi, ito yung pwedeng gawin. Okay? So, now let's go with measurement. Well, recognition is including an item in the financial statements. Measurement is defined as identifying the monetary terms, the element in the financial statements. Ibig sabihin, ito na yung amount. Talagyan mo na siya ng amount. Diba? Alam natin yung entry. Diba? Pag nag-entry ka, let's say may building tayo, debit building, credit cash. That is recognition. Recognize mo yung building. So the next question is how much yung pera, yung amount. Measurement na yung tawag ko. Okay? So sa conceptual framework na revise, dati 4 ito Pero pinagsama-sama niya iba sa current value. So ngayon, ang measurement na lang natin, dati 4, ngayon 2 na lang yung dimension niya. Historical cost, which is na-mention natin before cost principle, and current cost. Okay. Pag sinabi natin historical cost, ito yung cost. Historical dun dati. Anong dati, sir? Nung binili mo or in-acquire mo ang isang asset or yung transaction mo before yung sa liability yan, yung nagka-liability ka. For example, last 5 years bumili ka ng lupa. Yung lupang binili mo ay 1 million. 5 years ago. Yung 1 million na yun, that's the historical cost. Kasi yun yung cost ng pag-acquire mo before. Okay? 1 million na siya binili before, 1 million is the historical cost. Okay? Actually, ganun lang naman kadali yung explanation niya. Okay? Yung historical cost updated, nadagdagan na lang dyan, na-update siya, because may mga depreciation or amortization. Kasi for example, diba yung asset natin, let's say yung non-current assets, PP natin other than land, dine-depreciate natin. So let's say, iba naman, bumili ka ng building. Yung building is 500,000. 500,000 siya before. Tapos, nag-amortize ka ng 50,000 for this year. So yung carrying amount na lang is 450. Mababawasan siya ng 50, diba? So 500 yung historical cost niya before, pero na-update siya because nag-depreciate ka. So naging 450 na lang. So mga ganun bagay. Okay, payment received as a result of disposal or partial asset. So binenta mo na yung asset. Nag-impair. Impairment is nabawasan yung value. Medyo parang ganun din siya, pero hindi nga lang siya yung process ng depreciation. Depreciation kasi systematic. Itong impairment, depende na lang to. Pag nabawasan yung value ng asset, then na-impair siya. Pero ganun pa rin. Mababawasan yung value just like depreciation. Ano pa? Accrual, interest income, and amortized cost measurement of financial assets. So later na lang natin i-discuss yung mga ganyang updates yan. Medyo advanced na kasi. Pero itong amortized cost na yan, that is part of the module 3. Yung sa liability, by payment or satisfying the obligation, syempre pag nagbayad ka na, mababawasan yun. Or pag nasatisfy na obligation, baka mawawala na. No, increase in the value of the obligation, minsan nag-a-adjust yan eh. So later, sa higher accounting, may kita ng mga liabilities natin, pwede mag-change yung value, mag-fluctuate. Ano pa, kung walang interest, nagkaroon ka ng interest and yung amortized cost. Doon din, kasi lang liability accounting ito eh. So, intermediate accounting too. Okay, so that's historical cost. No, again, ang historical cost is magkano siya before. Nung binili mo, or nung nag-transact ka. Ngayon, current value, ito meron na siya application dito. Right, okay. Current value. Dati kasi current cost na. Ito, no? So, meron siyang apat. Yung iba naman dito eh, nilipat na pa. Dati kasi 1, 2, 3, 4 kasama yung iba dito. So, nandyan yung fair value, nandyan yung value use. Medyo technical yung iba dito, no? Full fulfillment value for liab and current cost. Ito kasi yung dating apat eh. Ay, wala pa nga realizable value dito. Ito, kasama yan. Dati may realizable value. Pero, na-embed na siya dito somewhere here. No? Now, let's talk about fair value. Fair value of an asset is the price that would be received to sell an asset in an orderly disposal between market participants at the market date. Ibig sabihin, how much you expect to sell a particular asset that is its fair value. Let's say, for example, mayroon kang land, tapos nakita mo yung land. Magkano ko kaya pwede may benta? No? Although maraming reference to a particular na fair value ng isang asset. No? Pero, yun nga, may mga terms kasi yung orderly disposal. Ibig sabihin lang naman, no, yung presyo nyo are not influenced. No? Ibig sabihin talagang fair yung pag-transaction. Hindi pwede kunyari, kung paano ko itong sa'yo, sige, discountan ko ng malaking deck. Kung magkano talaga yung independent in a presyohan. No? Buyer, seller, nagbentahan, nag-agree with the price that is the fair value. Okay? So marami pa siya dyan fair value. Value use, no? When we say value use, the present value of the cash flows that an entity expects to derive from the use of the asset and from the ultimate disposal. Normally, may ginagamit natin ito sa property, plant, and equipment eh. Doon sa topic na the valuation. Pero, pag sinabi natin value in use, simple lang naman. Magkano ba in-expect ng income na ma-generate from the using of the asset and then dinidiscount natin siya into present. Kasi futuristic yan eh. For example, no, kunyari meron kang sasakyan. Yung sasakyan na yan, pinaparenta mo. So titignan mo, ay yung sasakyan ko is only 5 years na lang yung useful life. So titignan mo, magkano ba yung pwede mo ma-generate na income from the next 5 years na yan? Yung 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Tapos, ito-present value mo yun sa i-discount mo. No? So that yung tinatawag natin value in use. Pag ginamit mo siya. Kasi yung fair value yung medyo, ang tinitingnan mo dito pag binenta mo. Pag binenta ko ba itong asset na ito, magkano ba makukuha ko ngayon? Ngayon. Value in use is, pag ginamit ko itong asset na ito over its useful life, magkano ba yung makukuha ko dun sa kanya, plus i-discount mo pa siya. Okay, that's the value use. But fulfillment value, present value of cash that an entity expects to transfer, paying, or settling a liability. So, magkano ba yung magiging babayaran mo for the entirety of the liability, tapos pina-present value mo siya. Diba? For example, ito may utang ako. Parang present value na rin siya eh. Present value. Yun na nga, ay dati pala. Yan, tama. Kasi ito, PV siya eh. Present value. Napansin mo, meron siya discounted present value. Dati, 1, 2, 3 present value. 4 na pala. Ito yung dati mga measurement basis. Nagtos before. Medyo nai-regroup niya lang. No? So, fulfillment value. Parang ganun din. Sa liability kasi, ito yung utang ko, ito yung mga babayaran ko for the next how many years. ito yung principal and interest, i-discount mo ngayon siya to the present, that is the fulfillment value for the liability. And lastly is the current cost. Okay, current cost of the asset is the cost of an equivalent asset at the measurement date comprising the consideration paid and transaction cost. Ang current cost kasi, ang difference nito, ito normally medyo magkalapit sila fair value at the current cost. The difference is, pag fair value, you're talking of an exact item. Exact item. Pero pag current cost, equivalent item lang siya. Let's say, for example, meron sasakyan. Tara na parang mas madali. May sasakyan. Meron kong car. Isuzu UX. Familiar kayo. Car. Ganyan. Pag sinabi natin fair value, we're talking of that particular car that you have. Okay? Sabihin natin, ito yung car ko is already 5 years old na siya. And then ito yung condition ng asset ko ngayon. Kung magkano yung presyo kaya niya ngayon, magkano mabibenta yan, that's the fair value. Nakuha? Pero pag sinabi natin current cost, we are referring to another asset, pero UX din siya. Ito yung UX dun ng iba, 5 years na UX ng iba, ito yung presyohan nila. So baka pwede mong gamitin yun in reference to yours. Yun yung sinasabi natin, current cost. Okay? So again, medyo pareho siya in essence kung magkano mabibenta. Pero ito, exact, the same asset. Pero ito, equivalent asset siya. Okay? Now, so ano gagamitin natin dito, sir? Marami tayong measurement basis. Lahat yan ginagamit natin, lahat yan pwede natin gamitin. Okay? Select the measurement basis for the asset and liability and for the related income and expense. It's necessary to consider the nature of the information that the measurement basis will produce. In most cases, no single factor will determine. So, maraming factor yan. And actually, pag pumasok na tayo dun sa standards, huwag kang mag-alala. Nagbibigay naman yung standard kung paano tayo mag-measure. Dapat ganito, dapat ganyan tayo mag-compute, dapat ito yung amount. Okay? Pero yan, may factor din natin na later. So, you go with the specific accounts na kalagay doon kung ano-ano yung dapat na gamitin sa kanila. Okay? So, lahat ng yan, pwede natin at pagagamit. So, that's it for chapter 6. And now, we will proceed with chapter 7. So, after this chapter 7, then na gawin niyo yung activities. Okay, conceptual framework, presentation, and disclosure. And concepts of capital. Okay? So, presentation and disclosure. Yung mga financial statements to. Presentation and disclosure can be an effective communication tool about information on financial statements. The reporting entity communicates information about its assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expense by presenting and disclosing information in the financial statements. So, in short, sabi nga natin, doon sa definition ng accounting, di ba may part doon na sa chapter 1, na mention natin yung communicating. Communicating is, syempre yung pag-present natin, pag-provide natin ng financial statements. That's the primary means of communicating financial information. So, ito rin naman sinasabi niya dito, medyo inulit niya lang. No? Tapos pati mga relevant, faithful representation, nandun din naman yan, pati mga enhancing na yan. Okay? So, classification. No? Classification is the sorting of assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expense on the basis of shared or similar characteristics. Classifying the similar assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expense can be obscure, relevant information, reduce understandability, comparability, and may provide faithful representation. Now, ito kasi yun guys, yung asset natin, kinaklasify natin, o ginugroup natin siya. Kinaklasify o ginugroup. Sa pag-present ng financial statement, sabi ko nga, kasi yung sa pag tinignan mo talaga yung actual practice, yung accounting, as in super dami ng accounts yung isang company. Napakaraming accounts yan. Isos ko natin para sa mga 200 accounts. Depende sa transaction ng company. Ngayon, hindi naman lahat ng 200 accounts yung makikita natin sa FS. Kino-concise natin siya. In-aggregate natin, o pinagsasama natin yung mga same na assets. Like for example, meron tayong classification ng current and non-current. Diba, may mga criteria tayo dyan pag usapan natin sa chapter. That's a classification. No? Yung mga current, sa taas, yung mga non-current, sa baba. Tapos, yung mga assets na yan, ginugrupa natin siya of similar nature. For example, cash and cash equivalents, that will be for module 2, isang item lang yan. Pero pag tinignan mo, napakaraming items ko pa rin. Trade and receivables na ating module 3, yan, isang item lang yan, nakapasify siya po. Makikita na ano ba yung mga nakalagay dyan. Diba? Property, plant, and equipment is one classification. Diba? Ito yung klase na na-encounter natin before. Meron tayong equipment, meron tayong land, meron tayong building, pero pag nag-present ka sa FS, pwede naman one item na. Magkakasama sila. Property, plant, and equipment. Okay? Bakit gano'n? Kasi simplify natin para mas madaling intindihan. Okay? Tapos hindi natin, yung sabi nga dyan kanina na, hindi natin pwede pagsama-samahin yung similar items. Hindi natin pwede isama yung ibang items ng cash, ilagay natin sa PPE. Or ibang items ng PPE, ilagay natin sa receivables. So, hindi pwede. Okay? Classification of income and expenses. Ito na yung may profit or loss and comprehensive income. Pero okay, nasa chapter 9 pa talaga yung detailed discussion nito. Okay? Conceptual Framework introduced the term Statement of Financial Performance for the statement of profit or loss together with the OCI. Okay? Dalawa kasi yan eh. No? May profit or loss and OCI. Yung profit or loss yung talagang pinaka-income statement niya. No? Yung nga lang, may mga other items kasi tayo nagpuproduce ng income or expenses, pero hindi siya talaga yung part na gusto natin maging part ng operations. So, doon siya napupunta sa other comprehensive income. Pero pinapresent pa rin natin siya as part of the total comprehensive income. Okay? Next, aggregation. Ito yung mention ko kanina yung aggregation rule. No? Sabi ko nga, kino-condense natin, sinasummarize natin, no? Kasi gusto natin yung report natin is concise. Gusto natin as much as possible, hindi siya masyadong detailed. Kasi pag masyadong detailed, mas nakakalito. So kaya, ginugroup natin yung mga assets natin, tapos pinapresent natin sila as one line item. Ito sa chapter, di-discuss din naman natin sa chapter 8. No? So may ganun tayo sa accounting, no? Yung rule of aggregation. Ginugroup natin, sabi nga natin, cash and cash equivalents, lahat ng cash and cash equivalents, one item yun sa balance sheet. Trade and receivables, one item. Inventories, one item. Other assets, one item. Property, plant, and equipment, one item. So ganun siya, nakagroup. Now, capital maintenance. Okay? The financial performance determined to approach. Dalawa, no? Pwedeng transaction approach. Okay, about financial performance, paano ba natin masasabi na kumita tayo, maganda yung kita natin? Dalawa. Transaction approach and capital maintenance approach. Okay? Yung ginagamit natin sa accounting, typically, ito tayo. Paano natin na-determine yung financial performance? Income versus expenses. No? That's a very typical. Yung total revenues mo or total income mo minus yung total expenses, meron pang profit or loss, that's the performance. Okay? Pero itong capital maintenance, this is a different approach. Siguro it's more like economics yung gumagamit ng mga ganitong klase ng concept. Ang sinasabi ng capital maintenance is this. Let's say, ito yung capital ko from the beginning. I-compare natin yan from the capital at the end. Now, let's say, wala namang transaction with the owner. Walang transaction with the owner, So, kung mas mataas yung capital ko at the end kaysa sa aking beginning, then probably ng income ko. Kasi di ba yung income dumadagdag sa capital niya? So, pag in-compare mo siya, mas naging okay ka pa, then probably may income ka. Or let's say ganito. Kunyari ganito yung level of income mo, 100. Ano yung beginning capital mo, 100. At the end of the period, 100 pa rin yung capital mo. Pero, na-remember mo, meron ka palang kinuha before the 12. Kinuha ka withdrawal para kung sa pwede siya natin withdrawal. May kinuha ka pa. So, probably, may income ka. Diba? Kasi nga, may kinuha ka na, but still, you're still as well as from the beginning. Therefore, may income ka. Yan yung sinasabi nitong capital maintenance approach. Okay? In short term, ganun lang yung sinasabi niya dyan. Ngayon, meron dalawang concept itong capital maintenance approach. Financial capital and physical capital. Financial capital and physical capital. So sa financial capital, invested money, invested purchasing power, capital synonymous with the assets or equity of other assets or equity of entity. So ibig sabihin, ito yung talaga financial na siya, yung pera talaga. No? Ito yung sa accounting na minimeasure natin based on historical cost. Actually, ganito sa explanation niya dyan. No? So ito yung capital na talaga yung pera. Kaya nga financial capital. Pera siya. No? Yan yung net asset or equity natin sa accounting. Yan yung makikita natin figure doon. Normally, it is the capital that is measured using historical cost. No? Pero pag physical capital, ito yung sinabi niya, is the quantitative measure of the physical productive capacity to produce goods and services. So medyo, ito rin yung ginagamit natin for economic purposes. Diba? Capacity. Ilan ba yung kaya i-produce? So pag sinabi natin capital niya dito, ito yung mga assets ko, ilan ba yung kaya niya i-produce the goods or services. No? So medyo economic siya, hindi siya yung financial na, hindi siya yung pera-pera. At tinitignan niya dito, productive capacity. Ilan yung kaya na i-produce. Okay? So normally, ito yung valuation na ginagamit niya dito is yung current cost. Okay? So yan. Basically, that is yung ating capital maintenance. So now we're done with chapter 7, so pwede mo na actually gawin yung activities mo. Okay? So, medyo marami pa yung chapter 8, so didiscuss ko na lang yung chapter 8 ng different. Okay, so, ano muna?